Let's get more analysis on the ANC's Elective Conference and those interesting developments that have occurred throughout the day's proceedings. We've got TK Poe, who is a political analyst, joining us this evening. A very good evening to you, TK. Very, very interesting day that's happened today in terms of the conference and the proceedings thereof. Your thoughts on the about turns that we saw coming through from Limpopo as well as Gauteng. And I must just mention, before you give me your thoughts, we had the Rand, which was sitting at really good strength today at around, earlier in the week rather, at around 17 Rand and 09 cents. And now we're sitting at around 17.64. And that's throughout the day. It's weakened quite a bit. Market participants, potential investors looking on at the conference, really concerned about the developments that we are seeing and really ultimately what it means for South Africa's economic growth and policy stability, which is what investors look for. But yes, your thoughts on those about turns that we saw coming through from Limpopo and Gauteng. Many saying they were a surprise, but were they really? Because ultimately that horse trading feeds into the agendas and wants of different delegates.
Well, no, thanks for having me. Look, I think it really wasn't a surprise. One of the murmurs that was happening around the conference leading up to is that many branch members chose to keep quiet because they said, listen, if we really express what we feel, many of these PC leadership, remember, who had already pronounced are going to disband us. So they basically said, look, let's keep our cards close to hand, and we'll basically surprise them at the conference. But now, you know, I always say the problem, and I think you kind of highlighted that there is almost an ignorance to the bigger picture which is happening around South Africa, which is to say none of the principles that are being discussed have anything to do with the Rand, economic policy, and basically the 10 million people who voted for the ANC outside of this 4,000 that are here. So what it says to me is, I think I remember the author Maya Angelou, who always used to say, if someone tells you this is who they are the first time, believe them. And I think the Rand and those that really are focusing on South African politics should not have been surprised. This has been the state of the ANC, that they are ignorant to broader pictures of society, and they really are just simply concerned about their own navel gazing. Hence, you have many of what I quote-unquote surprises coming up today.
Yeah, and it's quite worrying because it doesn't seem that there is a unified voice coming out of the ANC. I mean, this is quite obvious from what we've seen over the years, but the blatant divisions that are beginning to show themselves over the weekend are quite startling, in that these people kept their cards close to their chest, as you say, and then we get PEC member Lebogang Maile coming out to say, well, those who voted outside of branch agreements will be disciplined. I mean, how likely is that, and really what difference does it make to the ultimate decision that will be made in the next few hours?
Well, it's actually an interesting term. How do you discipline somebody? Because I believe the motto still applies that my vote is my secret, if I'm not mistaken. So how do you know who really turned? So it's one of those weird absurdities that people say, thinking that, look, things are not going our way. But for me, the bigger picture this goes back to 2007. This is when the ANC, I think, almost lost its integrity as an institution, not because there was an outcome people didn't like, but rather because they moved and veered away from the key issues of the day. Because remember, the key issues of there is what's supposed to unify a political party. There'll always be divisions. The divisions are not the issue. It's the principle in which the divisions are made. And in the case of the ANC, basically for the last, we'd say, 12 years, it's been divisions of individuals rather than policy processes. And the fact that it's very hard to put that, almost that joker back in the cards when you've simply said we are basically divided not on principle, not on policy, but simply individuals. Because outside of that, what else are you going to go back to? And I think we should really just get used to the fact that this is how the ANC is, and stop and really just say, listen, let's treat them the way they are, not what we presuppose. The days of O.R. Tambo, the days of Nelson Mandela, the days of Thabo Mbeki are gone. Let's treat them for what they are, which is a party which is not modern, a party which focuses on individuals, and most importantly, a party which focuses on the stomach. And the stomach says we will choose whoever will fill it.
Is this indicative then, TK, of the 330,000 members that have been lost to the party over the last 5 years? That sense of it being a liberator and one that bridges those socio-economic divisions. We've been disillusioned, I suppose, over the last few years to realize that actually, like you say, if someone shows you who they are the first time, believe them. The ANC is actually just full of empty promises and focus on, as you say, the politics of the stomach. And unfortunately for those who believed in the movement, this is unlikely to change ever.
Well, you see, and that's the thing. I think as South Africans, the ball, and it's apt that it's a World Cup that's just finished, the ball is in our court. And I've always said this, that look, I love my football team, which is Kaizer Chiefs. Win or lose, I love them. But that relationship at any given time or moment does not feed or does not really have an impact on my week, except for the emotions. But the problem is that South Africans take that same emotion and put it into a political party. Political parties are there to serve us. You cannot have an attachment to a political party. I've got a colleague who says the problem with the ANC as it relates to us as a society is that we treat the ANC almost like a religion. And people find it very hard to leave this religion called the ANC. And this is one of the key weaknesses within society. We need to ask the key question, does this vehicle, because that's all a political party is, serve your interest in your community, in the broader society? If it doesn't, move on. And I know citizens will say we are lacking on that regard, but that's fine. But let's try find other vehicles, because this vehicle named the ANC cannot perpetually have a hold on people. And unless that spell is broken, basically stop treating it like a football team, but treat it as a vehicle, we're going to be stuck in this vicious cycle.
No, we will indeed. So the big debate currently at the moment, TK, is this notion that Zweli Mkhize has ramped up his support and as well as his slate, and he could be the one delivering that final speech come the end of the conference. Based on your engagement with your sources and different stakeholders throughout the day, what are you picking up in terms of this actually being a likelihood come the end of the 55th National ANC Elective Conference?
I've actually kind of probably taken a bit different tact in the sense that I've purposely chosen that, listen, I'm not actually going to ask people that question. The bigger question for me is, if he is chosen, what does he represent? And when it comes to Mr. Zweli Mkhize, much like President Ramaphosa, there is an absence, and almost an absence of analysis of what do they stand for in terms of the economy. What is their guiding ethos? And I think that's how we should look at it. If it's a surprise, we really shouldn't be surprised if it's Mr. Zweli Mkhize. But maybe to answer your question more directly, it's almost like a flux in anticipation. But I think it comes from the fact that people did not properly analyze going into this conference that, listen, this was not a coronation, that we're going to be surprised. So maybe it's upon us, as maybe analysts who do come on television, to also be a bit more circumspect about what we say about predictions. I always say, let's rather focus on what society is asking for and place that as a prism by which we judge outcomes of conferences. Because I think to go into the who's winning, who's not, doesn't really help society. What society wants to know is to say, TK, if Zweli Mkhize wins, what does that mean for me and my community? And I think that's a better way to really focus on these ANC conferences. And this, we can also say the same prism for the issue of the DA and the EFF. Because we're at that stage now where we need to stop being, as I said, bedazzled by what these individuals mean and simply say, what does it mean for us? Because at the end of the day, the Republic, whether the ANC goes, the DA comes in, or the AFF or the IFP, it's actually it's a passing phase. But the Republic must stand, and I think that is how we should actually analyze what comes out of this. What does it mean for us as the Republic? And I can tell you, there's not much when it comes to policy. The ANC doesn't have policy. And as soon as we kind of address that and say, listen, the emperor has no clothes, it really does make analysis quite easy. And I think that's where we are. There is no economic policy from this party. It doesn't matter who the head is, because they have no policy to come towards business, to come towards the rest of us and say, this is what we're doing.
And I suppose that's a huge bit of concern there, TK, in that we are facing a reality that we could potentially be facing a coalition government at a national level post the 2024 elections. And if the ANC does not have a policy foundation that is strong enough, we may see what we're seeing at local government level, where there has been a crumbling in crucial metros that contribute to broader economic, socio-economic growth within the regions as well as the country as a whole. Does this concern you at all, that our reality of a coalition government is imminent and those who are likely to be part of it will be ill prepared?
That for me is my primary concern. I know there are people who are calling for this idea of coalitions, and I say, look, coalitions in the context and the history of South Africa simply means that the political environment has failed. I know people prop up the positives of coalition. What it simply says is that voters are saying we don't know who to pick from this bad bunch of fruits that we have before us. So it's not a positive in any certain way. And look, let's just be realistic about this. Let's just paint a scenario picture of where, look, as you would know, that there's a lot of trade deals which are going to be coming up. The UK is asking for partners. The European Union has taken a different tack. China has taken a different tack. You can just imagine 2 years from now when they bring in the key negotiators. Remember, all those countries have an end result that we want. You go to a coalition government. What would a coalition government want? Because first you're asking for people who, you're saying, listen, if you're party X who's just come in, you have to familiarize yourself with 1,000, and sometimes people forget this, thousands, not millions of agreements. You're sitting there across with the United States, with the European Union, who are masters at getting what they want out. So you're basically sitting there thinking, oh my word, I don't know what I'm doing. So when people are really calling for this coalition, I think they're looking at the wrong way. My answer has always been that the issue is not the political parties. The issue is the people that come into politics. And unfortunately, South Africans have got this aversion of wanting to get their hands dirty. We have absconded our right to these political parties to say, listen, you do what you want. Our best and brightest in business, in civic organizations, in education, somehow just abscond. We don't want to get involved in politics. And then we get surprised when we get the end result. And I think what this 2024, which I don't quite think it might be the landslide as people are calling for, because I'm looking more at 2029. What I'm looking for is to say, can South Africans finally catch a wake-up call to say, guys, it's not about these political parties, it's about the love of the republic. Because these political parties will come and go, but if we don't get our hands dirty, our kids are not going to have a future that they can rely on.
Yes, and so that we've been talking about one competition within the ANC, but I have to ask you about the other competition, the World Cup. Were you a supporter of France with our Kylian Mbappe, or were you a supporter of Argentina with our Lionel Messi? I have to ask you.
One word, Messi, 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 all the way.
You and many other around the world. TK, thank you very much for your time. That is TK Poe, who is a political analyst, joining us this evening there.